Namaste, everybody. Welcome back to Ripples in the Sand, the podcast brought to you by us folks at Drifting Sands Haibun. Here we invite Haibun poets who have appeared in the journal to both read and discuss their poetry and give us their thoughts on the craft. This is your host, Sangeeta Kalarikar. To our regular listeners, thank you so much for supporting us. Hope you have subscribed to our podcast and hit the notification bell. Please like, love, comment, share, and spread the word of haiku poetry to your friends. Today's guest is definitely an introvert, hates talking about herself, but she doesn't need to. For today's guest is very well known to most folks in the haiku world. Born in the UK, she now lives in Zurich, Switzerland. She moved there almost 20 years ago with a husband and children, all of whom have left the nest. She is the editor of the Poetry P podcast and the Poetry P Journal of Haiku and Senryu and Split P's Journal of Split Sequences. Her work has been published in the usual places. Folks, today we have Patricia McGuire. Welcome to the podcast, Patricia, or as readers of your work know you, Bisshie. Am I pronouncing that right?
You are pronouncing that right, yes. Yes, you are.
Okay, welcome.
Thank you.
So let me start with the most obvious question that comes to my mind when I read your work, that of the pen name. So what made you decide on a pen name and why Bisshie?
Okay. Fairly simple answer. I didn't feel comfortable writing under my own name for a couple of reasons. One is I wanted distance. I wanted a bit of distance from my own personality to allow other things through, if you like. I felt quite constrained by my name. The other was that I didn't start sending work out for publication for, I think, a couple of years after I started Poetry P, the podcast. And when that was as that was the case, I wanted to make sure that my work was judged on its merit and had absolutely nothing to do with Poetry P, because there is a potential bias there, and so I was sure as it started to get published that it was done because it was of a certain quality and not because it had anything to do with Poetry P. And so I kept it. That was, I'm happy with the name, and I kept on using it. And it's surprising how few people actually know it's me, which really makes me happy.
Okay. So your Poetry P podcast, iconic, and I feel is an absolute must for haiku lovers. And I discovered your podcast almost as soon as I started learning to write a haiku. So I can say that your views on haiku are definitely a part of my haiku journey. So when did you start your haiku journey?
Well, first of all, I'm very pleased you found us. Thank you very much. And I know we've been together for some years now, in haiku terms. When did I start mine? I think I started roughly around 2000, 2001, when my daughter brought home some homework that said she had to write haiku, and being educated in the British school system, had no idea what that was. It never cropped up, and I did have a good, comparatively good education, so this was brand new to me. But obviously, she was grade 3, so what would that be? 7, 8, I suppose. And they were basically learning syllables, not haiku.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so that's how I came to it. And to be honest with you, that's where I stayed for a very long time, 575. But I don't now.
Yeah, writing a good, real haiku, 575 English syllables is very tough, don't you think?
It's extremely tough. I've noticed, I was looking in my notebook, I've done a few recently, but it's by accident rather than design. And I think when it happens like that, that's fine. But if you try and force your way into a 575, no.
Yeah. Oh my God. So you have some haibun for us. What a treat. So first haibun you have for us today is, where's Yoda when you need him? published in Blithe Spirit 33.2, May 2023. 23, yeah. So, would you like to read it first?
Okay. Where's Yoda when you need him? Buck Moon. We rip each other's clothes off while the babies sleep. When the craving hits, I'm at Mother and Toddler's group in the church hall, baking Play-Doh muffins. Let's leave the buns to bake, I tell the kids. Grabbing each by the hand, I drag them at speed to the corner shop. It's a small one, mainly used by locals. Stephen, an elderly gent, is in front of me in the queue, chatting to Ravi, the shop owner. Any other day, and I might have joined in. I have plenty of opinions about Crystal Palace and their inability to win a game this season. Today, however, I want to shout at them to hurry it up. Ice cream melting on Princess Leia's lightsaber. The Force is with her. God bless her. Caitlin's tantrum does the trick. Stephen notices us and ushers us forward. I pay for the disintegrating ice creams and my peanuts. Stephen gives Caitlin and Miles 50p each, which stops the crying, and we depart the shop. I tear open the peanuts and throw some in my mouth. We are all temporarily happy. Play-Doh buns forgotten, we walk home, trailing vanilla ice cream. Privet blooms in an alderon garden. Morning sickness. I need to call my husband and give him the good news. He's asleep in the Bahamas. Thank you.
Oh, this sounds so much better when I hear it. Oh, I've read this. I've read this one several times actually, and I enjoyed this poem so much. You know, the first reading was fine, and I really liked it. And the second reading, that's when I noticed other breadcrumbs that you've left in the prose, you know, and I laughed out aloud at "Let's leave the buns to bake." Anything you'd like to talk about as a background
Yeah, I can
for
give you
this
some
one?
background on that. The reason I didn't give it at first is I wanted people to read it and maybe come to their own opinions. And if I think that's the way we're probably going to do that today, aren't we, Sangeeta? But
Yeah, sure.
background to this poem. Well, I think you're a mum, so you might have some inkling of where the poem comes from. It goes way back, over 30 years now, and it's like many pieces of fiction that we write. It is fiction, but it is based in my experience.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I know with two of my kids, I had a real craving for peanuts. That's where the peanuts come from.
Yeah.
And the rest
Got
of it
that.
is just a little snapshot of where I would be and what I might have been doing when I was pregnant with my third child. And it is, this is probably the beginning poem, or at least near the beginning poem, of a much longer narrative piece of work that I'm writing now. But this is
Okay.
right at the beginning, so you can imagine what the narrative poem is about roughly. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Awesome.
so this is the first, or nearly the first part of it.
Oh, beautiful. So beautiful. I mean, I was reading this, but hearing it, it's just another dimension altogether.
It's always nice to hear poetry, or I think we can call
Yes.
Haidun poetry out loud. It makes a difference, particularly if you
Yes.
get to hear it in the person's voice that wrote it.
Yeah. Yes.
So
Yes.
that's
Yes.
put
I
a bit of pressure on
completely.
Sangeeta. I hope the rest live up to it.
Now, I love listening to your the way you render haiku, Senryu. It's just fantastic. That's a standard for me, you know.
Thank you.
So, the next poem of yours was published in Drifting Sands, number 21.
Yes, it was.
Shall we hear it, thanks?
Okay. Postpartum. Pale hands accentuate the liver spots. Winter morning. Don't let them shock me, her mother tells her as they get in the car to go to their first therapy session. Why? Why would they shock you? Brittle ice, the remembrance of lost time. Old wound, diligently carving a route downhill. Thank you.
Yeah, this haiku of yours is very different in that it has just 2 sentences of prose.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like a haiku sequence. When I first read it, extremely beautiful. And this, very little prose, but important, very makes it very poignant and gives it layers of meaning, and it makes it deeper. So, what was your intention in doing this, writing it like this?
Well, I think most of my writing happens by accident, the way it sort of turns out. But when I sit down to write a haiku, and you may have wanted to ask me this question later, but forgive me for covering it now. When I sit down
Please, go ahead.
when I sit down to write something like this, I generally have an idea, and I don't know whether sometimes the haiku comes first, the prose comes first, sometimes the haiku comes first. But in this case, the prose, short as it is, sort of popped into my head. It's again, it comes from experience to a certain extent, and it comes from a particular moment in time. So that moment popped into my head some while ago, and then once the idea, the sort of little snippet of an idea comes to mind, I sit down and I get my notebook out and I write haiku. And I look at the situation that I'm trying to describe from every angle that I can, from up, down, inside out, and try and use all the senses for my haiku as well. So I'll have a page anywhere between, 5, 10 haiku that I might be able to use within a haiku. But then I look at what I've got, and that helps me to frame where the prose goes and how much prose I use. And I felt that I felt that the haiku, more or less, the 3 I chose to use, more or less told as much as I wanted to tell, but that maybe a bit of prose was needed just to put it in context. And I think the prose does add to it somehow. But
yes, it does. And it makes it really that concentrated pill,
yeah,
just very, very.
I think I think concentrated is quite a good word for it. That's what I wanted. So thank you very much. I understand it better now.
This is so perfect. So I did want to ask you whether prose comes first or haiku, because for different poets it's different, and so for you it doesn't really. It's both ways. Yeah,
definitely comes both ways, but I think for me it's most important, once whatever the idea is, that I sit down and I write the haiku, because I really feel they frame what I then go on to write.
Yes. Okay, and so let's hear the next poem. Now, the title of which was very amusing for me.
Okay.
And I'll ask later where that came from. Davy Crockett's Hat.
I think
this was also published in Drifting Sands, number 26.
Yes, very recently, and I think you're going to be surprised when you ask me the question about that. Anyway.
Okay.
Okay. So this is Davy Crockett's Hat. The homeless man, the one with the tent on Main Street, shouts at all the men who pass him. All the men who are younger than him, that is. To women, he is positively charming. He greets us with the compliments of the season, sometimes extolling the virtues of the clothes we're wearing, praising our hairstyles, occasionally telling us how beautiful we're looking. Now that I'm used to him and his ways, I feel almost comfortable when I walk by. Except, well, it's his hat, you see. I find his hat troubling. Autumn leaves. The tabby cat hides from hunger. Thank you.
Oh, so well. So I love this vibrant description of this nameless man, and it's so enjoyable. So as soon as I hear the title, I'm looking for a comparison between this person and Davy Crockett's hat with a raccoon tail hanging in the back, right? So one, was this guy's hat really raccoon hide? And what about it troubled you? And most importantly, in my head, being British, why did you use an American congressman as a symbol?
Well, first of all, I didn't know he was a congressman.
Oh,
I know none of the history. To me, it's just a hat. I presumed it was Davy Crockett was a hunter, and he made this hat because he was a hunter. It kept him warm in the cold, probably somewhere up your way. So yeah, that's it. Got nothing to do with the congressman. Terribly sorry about
that. I was trying to look for it.
I know, sorry, but it's
no.
Was this okay? Let's go back to when I write. It's sometimes about it's always about something that has struck my attention, come to my attention, and then I go off on a tangent usually. And this is definitely one where I've gone off on a tangent. So let me tell you the history about it. This is Davy Crockett's hat is written for my daughter-in-law. She hasn't got it yet. She doesn't know this yet. But my family.
You won't tell her.
I'm going to see her. I'm off to the States next week, so I'll tell you what. So, my family wrote me a little book of haiku for my 60th birthday.
Oh, wow.
I treasure it. It's absolutely beautiful. And even though some of them have never done it before, they've done it. They've all tried. I should say poetry. Some of them went with poetry rather than haiku, but most of them went with haiku. So I have this little treasure, this little book made for me. So what I've done is I've written something for everyone who contributed to that book, and this is for my daughter-in-law. Now, my daughter-in-law is the owner of Poetry P's cat, Chorizo. You might have seen him. Chorizo.
Okay.
So Chorizo lives in New Jersey, and he is a rescue cat. Okay. And when he first came to live with a family, he used to hide from everything. So this is a combination about a man who lives on the streets of a town in New Jersey. He does exist to a certain extent, not quite as I've made him up. He does have a tent on a main street, and he does shout at all the men who pass him. And he is very, very nice to all the women, particularly older women. He's really charming to older women. So elements of it are true. But the bit at the end, autumn leaves, the tabby cat hides from hunger.
Yeah.
That's about Chorizo. And he sort of blends in with his colouring. He would blend into some autumn leaves very nicely. Yeah. And he's hiding from hunger, but it's not his hunger he's hiding from. He's hiding from the homeless man. In my story, he's hiding from the homeless man's hunger. Yeah. And the hat is a cat, not a raccoon.
Aha.
There you go. So sorry to disappoint you.
Okay.
Convoluted. I don't think you have to get that necessarily to enjoy it, but that's
no, I don't. It's just such an enjoyable a poem, but also it emphasizes the plight of homeless in the world. That's why it's so moving.
Yeah. I mean, Switzerland, Zurich in particular, does not really have a huge number of homeless people. It's increasing as the refugee situation, we have more and more refugees coming here. But certainly I don't see it as much as I would see it on the streets of London or on the streets of New Jersey when I'm over in New Jersey visiting family. So, yeah, you're right. It's really about the homeless. It's about the problems they face, and it's about chorizo's
Mm,
life in a way too. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Oh, what a beautiful tribute to the cat.
I hope so. Hope he likes it. I'll read it to him, see what he says.
Um, meow. I'm sure your daughter-in-law would love it.
I hope so.
It's beautiful. Um, okay, so the next poem of yours, published in Drifting Sands, number 20, and it's called The Atheist Dilemma. So yeah, let's probably have you read it first, and then we can
Good.
delve into the poem.
Okay. The Atheist's Dilemma. A newborn's cry drowns out the driving rain. Ides of March. In the quiet of my head, I have a little chat with Mary, mother to mother. Mary, I know I'm highly skeptical of the virgin birth, that the father of your child, Jesus, is God, indeed, that God even exists. But I'm desperate. And if you do exist, with the power the church would have us believe you have, I really need your help. You know you'd ask if you were in my shoes. Could you have a word with Jesus and ask him to make sure he doesn't... I'm sorry, I can't even say the word. I can't acknowledge it's a possibility. So could you, do you think, have a word? A child, still again, white lilies. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I absolutely love this one. And the reason is a personal one. A couple of things. First, I love having chats with people from different religions myself. That's one thing. But what the poem is actually about, oh my God. Um, I love that your haiku serves as bookends for your haibun. And and then, I'm reading the whole poem and say, do you think, have a word? That was fine. And then came your one line haiku, and boom, my heart stops and tears literally jump off my eyes.
I have to say, it's
Can
actually,
you?
it's hard for me to read it without
Yeah,
wanting to cry, but there you
yeah,
are.
yeah, yeah. It's so many emotions, so
Mm.
many emotions. And to to the point. I mean, this is about a child, but I could totally see this about a very dear one. May not be a child, maybe a grown up.
Mm-hmm.
It it this thing about why why is this happening kind of situation. Could you please elaborate on your title? Why
Oh,
dilemma?
that's an easier one to do. That takes us into different territory altogether.
Yeah, because yeah,
Um, okay,
yeah,
so
I wanted to because I'll cry otherwise.
bless. Let's move on. Okay, the atheist's dilemma. Uh, okay, so I was brought up by very strict Catholic parents, and I was educated
Mm,
by the nuns. I went to a Catholic school in the UK,
mm,
a state school, but
mm,
the UK allows religious schools. So I was enrolled in one, and I went to a religious school for most of my education up to university times. So I am really very Catholic in my thinking,
mm.
but I don't believe in God, which is a bit of a problem now. So, but I've changed once I got out of the Catholic education system. Once I wasn't being browbeaten is the wrong word, but it was a bit like that about God and everything. And I started really thinking for myself. Then I started
Mhm.
thinking, well, does he exist? Does he not? So I think probably the best way to explain my stand is that I'm a sort of agnostic atheist. So I'm not saying he doesn't
Yeah.
exist necessarily, but I'm not
Yeah.
convinced. So,
Yeah.
but my Catholic teaching is still with me. It's still very strong within me. Going back to the first one, the
All
Force is
right.
still very strong within me. And the nuns would say to you that you must never ask for a favor. Never ask Mary, Jesus, God. Never go to God and ask them directly for a favor. That's just not the done thing. But here I find myself in this dilemma. It is
Yeah.
about a child. It's another part of the
Yeah.
poem that we were working on that I read earlier.
Yeah.
It's about a child. It's about the birth of a child, and that's why I'm talking to Mary, the mother of Jesus, mother to mother,
Yeah.
and it's a dilemma for me because I know I shouldn't be asking for this favor, particularly as I'm,
Uh,
on the atheist sliding towards atheism rather than believing. But still, I have to ask because any
yeah.
chance that could save this child,
Yeah.
I have to
Yeah.
take it.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
that's where the dilemma comes from, the atheist dilemma in the title.
Yeah. 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 And I also had a started off with a Catholic education,
Ah, okay.
not by nuns but by monks.
Oh,
So father and brother, and you know,
mm-hmm,
and I totally. So I'm brought up Hindu.
mm-hmm.
My parents, and at home I'm Hindu. But I would say that my initial education has so much of a Catholic flavoring, right? And I see totally where it comes from. That after so long, you've left this institution for so long, it's still there.
Oh, yeah.
It's still there. It's amazing
It's
how strong
it is amazing how
that.
strong it is, and when at times of crisis, like when I lost my father, I found myself doing the same thing. I was
Yeah.
praying mainly because I knew it would make him happy. And and if
Hmm.
if God
Yeah.
does exist and he is in heaven, then he'd like that. He'd take a
Yeah.
bit of a crack
Yeah.
out of hearing me praying. So yeah, it's still strong.
It's that kind of almost like an indoctrination, isn't it?
It is.
Um, right from childhood.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness,
Mhm.
yeah. But the point is, when you with your back against the wall, we kind of tend to, yeah, look to any path that can take us out of there, right? Anything,
Mhm.
anything. And that's why I was saying, yes, it is about a child, and that is very close to me, I know. But I know also that people could this would be very close to somebody who's lost anybody
Yeah.
close to them anyway. It's yeah. So that's why this touches so many people, almost anybody, I would
Wow.
say.
Mhm.
Thank you. So yeah, so let me change a little
Okay.
bit, uh, and I've often wondered, with your busy life, publishing a podcast every week. My God, that's a lot of work,
It is.
researching for that, and of course the other normal life stuff, right?
Mhm.
Um, what is your writing regimen like?
Ooh.
Is it daily? Do you write on your phone during your walks? And what about bike rides?
Oh.
I mean, you go on bike rides quite often. So how do you do this?
Well, I should really come up with something outstandingly good and say that I write every day and I set an hour or 2 hours and I have my coffee in the morning and I sit down at my desk and I get on with it. But no, you're quite right. The podcast, and because Poetry P is so much more than a podcast these days, it takes up
Yes.
I'd say it is a proper full-time job for me now. I spend
Hmm.
that sort of time on it, but it's very important to my health that I get out and I get some exercise. So I'll usually, if the weather's good, I'm a bit of a fair weather bike rider these days, I have to admit. And it's been snowing the last few days, which is horrible. Oh, I know.
Oh
What's going on? It was spring last week. Anyway, so most days I'll go out on my bike in the morning and I'll ride for a couple of hours. So I'll do somewhere between
no!
10 to 20 kilometers a day on my bike.
Oh wow!
I know, but I love my bike. I love my bike.
Yeah.
And I have gone to getting an electric one now because I live in a part of the world, Switzerland, so you can imagine it's quite hilly.
Yes.
So now I do
And
need
beautiful.
a very beautiful, very beautiful. But I do need a wee bit of help sometimes now going up the hills. So
Mm.
my electric bike and we go out every day as much as we can if the weather's good. And I always take my phone with me and something will
Mm.
hit me along the way and I won't, probably nothing will form in itself, but I'll write maybe a sentence. So I generally write in a sentence unless something has formed in my mind, and then I'll put in a proper three lines. I generally write in 3 lines more than I write in 1 line or any other line.
Mm.
So the
Mm.
phone is very, very handy. But even when I'm out on my walk, so I'll do a bike ride in the morning and I'll walk in the afternoon for maybe 3 or 4 kilometers. And again, because it's so beautiful where I live, I live just on the outskirts of the city of Zurich, but the outskirts of the city of Zurich is farmland, and I'm
Mm.
within a number of walking range of a number of farms, so I'll maybe go out and get my eggs at the farm and do something like that.
Oh,
I know,
oh,
it's lovely. So
you're spoiled.
very, very lucky. I'm a very lucky girl. I know this.
Yeah.
But yeah, the phone comes with me, so I generally will note everything down, and then once a week, usually on a Sunday afternoon, I will spend some time looking through the phone and
Mm.
putting something to rights if something comes to me. Or, though I don't know about you, Sangeeta, but most of my good stuff comes to me in the middle of the night and it's gone by the morning. I'm a brilliant haiku writer in the middle of the night and just an average one during the day.
Come on.
No, seriously, that's how it seems to work. So I do
So what do
sleep.
you do in the middle of the night?
I sleep with a notebook next to me, and
Oh, really?
yeah, I mean,
Okay.
and I don't dare turn on the light because I don't want to wake my husband up, obviously. But so I every night I make sure I've got a blank page ready for
Uh-huh.
anything that comes to me and a pencil, obviously. And in the morning, I have to try and figure out what on earth I wrote.
What?
So it doesn't always work out, but I do my best. That's my regime. I wish I could do something better for you, but that's it.
No, that's great. This is so much fun. Don't you use a phone in the middle of the night?
Oh no, I
Because
don't.
that is easy.
No, I don't
Okay, you
allow the
don't have
phone
your
anywhere
phone.
near me. My phone does not come into the bedroom.
Oh,
Mm-mm.
oh, that is very, very strict regimen, I
Oh
would
yeah, no.
say.
The phone.
Fantastic,
It's loud
fantastic.
enough. It's
Yes.
not that far away, so it's loud enough if one of the we have a family emergency and somebody's got to get hold of me, it will wake me up. But I don't allow any
Uh,
gadgets like that in the bedroom because I don't
yeah,
know. I think it has it's not good for you
yeah,
necessarily
yeah,
to be doing that.
yeah.
And
Especially when you're trying to
when
sleep.
you're trying to, and I will scroll. I will
Oh,
if it's
ah,
there, I'm going to
keep you
mess
up.
about with it. So out of the bedroom, leave me alone.
You'll do your research in
I
bed.
do.
And
So I'm much better off getting a
yeah.
bit of sleep and leaving the phone somewhere else. So that's, yeah. I mean, it's a nice idea, but
And
no,
then scribbling.
scribbling.
But yeah, talking about research, I thoroughly enjoyed the one that you had about German poetry, German haiku. Oh,
Mhm.
fantastic! That was so good, and I will leave a link to that
Oh,
episode.
thank you.
On this because that was one of. I mean, I was blown away. I was blown away. I did not think so much about German haiku writing
Mhm.
anyway, or short form poetry. So
Well,
that
there's
was very, very.
I'm getting a bit of help from a lovely lady called Sandra Simmons. and we're going to
Hmm.
do I think quite an extensive one on French haiku as well.
Ah,
I'm going to do the whole.
oh,
I'm going to
fantastic.
do Spain and France for sure, because they're
Oh,
countries that I
fantastic.
at least might have an ability to translate some of them myself. So
Hmm.
we're definitely going to do
Hmm.
those. But if anyone else wants to come along and do something for another language, I'm open, because I think we spend a
Okay.
lot of time reading English, and there's a lot of work
Yeah,
out there in countries that don't
yeah,
speak English.
yeah, yeah. Yeah. And language itself is so different from English, right? I mean, um, uh, especially French or Spanish, or even Hindi,
Mm.
the language is so I think they're more melodic in itself, uh, the languages. So it's very interesting to see how the haiku there feels like. I mean, I have not read any French either, but Hindi, yes, in this journal called Tria, if I'm not
Okay.
mistaken, they do a lot of translation. So very, very different from English language haiku, but very nice, very, very nice.
Mm.
Yeah. Looking forward to Sandra Simmons on poetry. So French haiku,
French, and then later
yeah,
Spanish. Yeah.
Spanish, yes. Hmm. So the last Haibun you have for us today was published in Contemporary Haibun Online, CHO 1902, right? The Outsider. Would you like to read it first, and then maybe we could discuss it?
Okay. The Outsider. Absolute bliss. A walk on a sunny spring day as far as the high marshes. The farmer has left one field next to the frog ponds to its own devices this year. It's full of colour. Long green grass, red poppies, blue cornflowers, and something white. There, near the top of the field, a young man cavorts and whoops with obvious delight. His shirt circles his head, his snow-white chest bare. His joy is infectious. My joy is tinged with sadness, because sooner or later someone will call the police or his mum. At the edge of the legume field, brassica flowers. Thank you.
Hmm. Thank you. Thank you. Ah, this haibun is one which contrasts the joy of nature with the underlying pathos at this boy's situation. Would you like to talk a little bit about this before we go a little bit
Okay.
deeper?
Okay. So again, a little bit of truth, a lot of fiction in this one.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
this one actually was quite unusual in that it came to me on a bike ride. That's not the unusual bit.
Hmm.
But the unusual bit is that the haiku at the edge of the legume field, brassica flowers, was fully
Hmm.
formed. Went on my phone, nothing I wanted to do with it. I wanted to leave it
Wow.
like that. Doesn't happen often, does
Okay.
it? But this time it was fine. And the reason I think it was, again, I was riding my bike along. The field literally was full of legume, growing peas in there, some short form of peas or beans. And at the edge of the field, there was the remnants of the previous year's crop, because obviously I've lived here a long time,
Mm,
so I see the crops year in, year out. And they had been left to shoot, so the brassicas were flowering as
yeah.
they do. And that in itself was fully formed, but then it brought a lot of other things home to me. When I was back in the UK, I did a lot of voluntary work for mental health charities, because mental health
Hmm.
is very important. Improving mental health
Yeah.
provision is very important to me wherever I am.
Yeah.
And because of that, I was involved in inspecting mental health hospitals, mental health services, and so on, and came, spoke to patients and spoke to their families and their loved ones.
Mm.
And
Mhm.
as you might have gathered from my earlier one, my mother had mental health problems
Yeah.
somewhat when I was young, then a great length of time when she was well, and then she had about 20 odd years at the end of her life when she really wasn't very well either. So I know it from both
Mm.
sides. I know it from talking to other people, and I know it from my own experience. Well, from my mum's experience, and I know what it's like often when you have mental health difficulties, or you have a member of the family with mental health difficulties. You
Mm.
see
Mm.
that they are outsiders. People are scared often. And that goes back again to our gentleman in New Jersey, the homeless man. People are scared by mental health difficulties. They don't know how to
Mm.
react to them. They don't want to go near people often with mental health difficulties. And when I saw this brassica flowering at the edge of the legume field, it just felt to me like like an a little outsider, and all these other people, perfectly normal legumes doing their own thing, and this brassica flower bolting and
Oh,
blooming.
yeah.
See, that's
Yeah.
where I was coming from. And
Okay. Okay.
because of the work I've done in the past, and I even see it here. I live close to a community home for people with disabilities, and I see how people react to these the people who live there when they're out and about, and it makes me so
Mm.
sad to see them being treated as outsiders. There's not much I can do. I mean, my language would prevent me from doing much work here with
Yeah.
people with mental disabilities,
Okay.
but it just makes me sad, and that's where this
Yeah.
one comes from. And I know you sort of, as a gardener, you were thinking, is this something to do with um, planting? Well, the companion planting. Do you know what I do?
Yes.
Yes,
Yes. So,
it could so easily have been, because I do a lot of
yes.
companion planting in my garden. But on this occasion,
Yeah.
no, it was really about where that brassica flowering took my mind um, off to sort of mental health problems and issues.
Yeah, yeah. Now, and also, this also shows how much you can leave a poem to the interpretation, right? I mean, the way I looked at it was very
Hmm.
different. I mean, is it to do your extended metaphor, companion planting, where you have very different plants, but they're beneficial to
Yeah.
each other? Is there something that we're learning from people who are not like
Mm.
us anywhere, any situation. So that is where I was going with it. Um, while different, you can coexist and thrive. That is where I was going
And
with it.
that was
But
when I thought about it. I thought you've got a point, because obviously we briefed each other a little bit before we started doing this,
yeah, yeah,
um,
yeah,
and I thought that could be true, but I do worry these days, as it just seems that we are sort of very black and white in our societies now. People like this, they don't like that. They're very, I think, maybe social media. Maybe I spend too much time on social media. Maybe that's what it is. But
no,
I
not enough.
I don't know if we're doing enough coexisting and thriving, if we're
Yeah,
allowing each
this is
other
so
to be
true.
to be different, and
Yeah,
allowing and recognizing that difference isn't a bad thing. That difference can enrich our society.
yes, yes,
So
yes.
I don't know. You've left me thinking about that one, Sangeeta. I'm going to have to think about
Yeah, it's something we wish would happen in the world, isn't
that.
it? Um, you know, you live differently, and in your differences, you find what is common, right? Through and make and thrive.
I,
So,
I wish.
yeah, that
I
is,
wish.
I wish. Yeah, yeah. But this Haibo and the Outsider
Hmm.
really uh, brought home a lot of, I would say, truths about our society, especially when you go out and even if when you go to, coming back to the homeless
Hmm.
folks. Many I see here do have a lot of mental health issues,
Mm.
and I wish we could do something to address that as well, because that goes a long way in helping folks. Uh, yeah. So I was just trying to grab the extended
Hmm.
metaphor in your poem here.
But I think you made an
Mm,
important point. We can only we. I'm really interested often, and so I've been enjoying reading your take on the work. I'm interested to see what people make of the work, because when you write it, you have a certain idea in your mind, don't you? You think,
yeah,
and
yeah,
often, I mean, the thing with haibun or Japanese English language Japanese short forms, that's such a mouthful, but
yeah.
is that you show rather than tell, which is not the case
Yes.
if you were writing a normal English language novel or
Free verse
your free
or
verse.
yeah.
So
Oh,
your work is very much open to interpretation, and I love it
yeah.
when people take it in a certain way, and I think, oh, as often I think, gosh, that's much better than I thought. Actually, thank you very much. so, so,
So people come with
hmm,
different backgrounds, different baggages, right?
yeah,
So
absolutely.
yeah. Well, that's one thing that I like about haiku, and something that I learned from listening to Poetry P. There is this white
Mm,
space, empty space that you leave for the reader to fill, and that's important. And
absolutely.
with so few words,
Yeah.
that's almost where you're striving to be, right?
Yes, it is, but
Yeah.
it does make it very difficult, I think, for those of us brought up in Western poetry. Going back to our education, being educated in the sort of English canon or English-speaking canon, where the
Mm.
poetry is very, very different. To make the switch is initially
Yeah.
discombobulating, but once you do it,
Yes.
once you can do it, it's very rewarding.
Yeah, and there's no going back.
Nope, I agree. I certainly won't be going back.
It's funny because I do still write free
I
verse, and
know.
there are a lot of people who still do, a lot of, and everybody. But I feel that writing good haiku has enriched my free verse and other poetry writing,
Hmm.
as well as understanding. So that is a much deeper connection to us and the nature around um, haiku is. So even though it's just 3 lines or less.
Yeah, or
Or
less.
yeah,
And I think
yeah.
um, the other thing I would say is that I'm never going back to free verse. Well, never say never, but it's unlikely I would go back to free verse. But I do write a lot of prose, and haiku has really helped with the prose. In that, before it would
Mm.
just be sort of flowery. I'd give full rein to as many adjectives and adverbs as I wanted, but now, when I read it back, I think, oh, would you have put that in a haiku? And and that's the case, then take it out. There's too much in there.
Do you need
Yeah.
it,
Do
right?
you need it? No. Put a pen through it. Kill your darlings. So
Oh, kick the puppy.
I know, I know, but it has helped. I think it's helped improve my writing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, 3 lines. What do you think about tanka and tanka
I was
prose?
dreading this question.
Oh,
You know,
sorry. I thought you did refer to
yes,
tanka in
yes.
Poetry P, if I'm not
No, you're not
mistaken.
mistaken. You
Yeah.
are not mistaken. Well, I mean, as you probably gathered, because you listen to Poetry P, I tend to do an awful lot of research, and
Yes. Yes.
I am very much, I feel, a beginner with the tanka genre.
Mm.
I mean, I know a lot about waka, where it comes from, the sort of
Mm-hmm.
early days,
Mm.
but I feel that I'm very much stuck at the sort of, you know, 16th century end of the tanka genre, and I don't yet know
Mm-hmm.
enough about how it changed, because it has changed obviously
Modern.
and evolved as you would expect it to. And the way I like to work is that I like to be very secure in my knowledge of where it's come from before I then dip my toe into something contemporary. So I'm really not yet dipping into contemporary stuff too much.
Okay.
But yes, we are going to be doing, starting later on this year, we're going to be doing a lot more about tanka. And again, I'm going to ask people who are much more au fait with contemporary tanka to come along and help me.
Yeah.
And I've got a couple of people who've said they would, but I haven't got back to them and said, "You're right, you said you would. Now you have to." So I'll not mention any names yet in case they've had sort of a change of ideal. But yes, we're going to be looking at that just from the historical point of view, from building up our knowledge, sort of stepping
Yeah.
stones, and then looking at what's going on in a contemporary form. And we're going to be writing. We haven't ever asked people to write tanka before, but we will be doing that this year. And I will be, by the
Okay.
time we get to it, I am going to know what I'm talking about. So that's that. But yes, so
No, I'm really, really interested in the historic journey of
mm,
tanka through your eyes.
oh,
It's, yeah.
I better do a good job of it then.
You always do. You never let me down anyway.
Yeah, so
Oh,
I think Tanka Waka has got a beautiful, beautiful history, and I've got so many wonderful examples that we will be probably doing quite a few episodes on and off, just to look at these wonderful examples of tanker in the past and to look at what's going on right now.
yeah. So wonderful. Looking forward to
Thank you.
that. It's so much different than a haiku.
Yes.
It's yeah. So I do enjoy a good tanka. Yeah, it's lovely. So is there a book in the making next?
Well, yes.
Ooh,
Yes. So it's in the making now. Again, I was doing Great Guns, as you've heard a couple of pieces from it already
yeah.
today, and I was doing really great. It's not a long story, but it's considerably longer than the atheist's dilemma. So the atheist dilemma will
Uh,
be slightly changed in the book, but
mhm.
it's a story about something that happened to me 30 years ago, and I kept a diary throughout the experience. And
Mm,
I was only able to read that diary this year. I couldn't go back to it. I couldn't face going back to it before. So what I'm doing is
yeah,
creating that diary in a short form and making a book of it. And it's going to include haibun, haiku, split sequences, maybe even tanka. You never know. But it will be. It's going to be a story told in
yeah,
a variety of short form styles, and
yeah.
we shall
Wow.
see. I was stuck for a very long time on a particular episode in the book, and I it was a very simple. It wasn't a terribly emotional. Maybe that's why it wasn't a terribly emotional part of the book. But I couldn't think how it was an important part, and I couldn't think how to do it. But this week I got I got quite a few haiku written, so I reckon I'm back on track again. So we'll see. I don't know
Yay.
if anyone will be interested in publishing it, but um,
There'll be a lot interested in reading it.
there might be people who are interested in reading it. So we'll see. Something will
Yeah,
happen, but
yeah.
it's it. I should think it won't be ready till the middle of next year because I don't know about
Mm-hmm.
you, but I write it and then I spend far too long editing probably.
Yes, yes.
So we'll have to again. I have to stop myself from over editing on that. But I have got. There is a person who will remain nameless who keeps me on track and nags me about it. So for
Oh,
her,
fantastic.
yeah, for her sins, I'm going to send when it's finished. I'm going to send it to her and say, "Well, right, you nag me to do this, so you have to read it now and tell me what you think." So that's that.
Yeah, so from what I understand and from what you just said, I feel this is working through a very difficult
Yeah,
time in your
it
life.
is.
And so kudos to you for facing it and congratulations, I would say, on maybe not growing. I mean, it's a difficult thing to do, just facing that time, because there are some instances I have not even been able to look at it squarely in the eye, even so many years afterwards. So I bow to you. It's a really very brave thing to do.
I think it's time.
Yeah.
I've just felt you have to wait till it's time. And I think Roberta Beery once said, I think on the podcast, but certainly within a conversation I had with her, that she is the Haiku editor from Modern Haiku. And she says
Yeah.
sometimes, and this is true, I found this with Haiku that's been sent to us too, sometimes people go too soon to an experience
Mm,
and write about it. And
yeah.
they're far too close to the experience to be
Yeah.
able to write about it. And I think
Yeah.
there are a number of reasons why I wanted to do this now, but I did feel that after 30 years, I'd probably at least left enough time to have a little bit of distance and a bit of perspective about it. So it turns out that I think I'm right, but I could be terribly wrong and it could be absolute rubbish, but we'll see.
Oh no, no, I cannot imagine anything like that coming from you.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll
But
see.
yeah, facing those is such an incredibly brave thing to do. We don't all realize how many courageous little things we have to do to live.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
And sometimes people will,
So,
even though it takes a lot out of you to revisit certain situations, sometimes
mm,
if you write about it, somebody reads it, it can be helpful to somebody else.
yes, that's true
Maybe,
too.
maybe.
That's true too.
See.
Yeah. So poetry is so much about healing, isn't it?
You're not kidding. I mean, that's how Poetry P came about. I was very, very ill. And
Oh, really?
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And
You alluded to it a little bit sometime during your podcast,
oh,
but
yeah.
yeah.
So yeah, it came about to try and distract me from how ill I was.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
thankfully, I am. I will never be 100% better, but I'm not going to die, which was a
Yeah,
possibility at the time. But it was,
yeah,
it's got
no,
better. So, and I think to a certain extent, that healing, um, or Poetry P and haiku and the friends I've made, because let's face it, there are a lot of friends
mm,
I've made within the haiku community now through Poetry P.
yeah,
That
yeah,
I think that certainly helped in the healing process too. So
yeah,
I would say if anyone's feeling a little bit sickly, go and write a haiku or go and learn about haiku or some short form, because
yeah,
it really helps.
yeah. Read, read
Read
haiku,
haiku,
read.
and there was an episode I think on the podcast with Tim Roberts from New Zealand.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Yes, yes, I
and
remember.
he puts
Oh
that
my
so much better
gosh.
than I did. That it's such a healing process. Well, healing, yes, healing and helpful process when you're going through something like
Yes.
that.
So true. So true. Yeah. Oh, what a joy it has been for us here at Ripples to have you visit us, hear you read your poems, talk to us about your writing process and everything. So,
Thank you.
uh, we are at the end of our time. So, thank you so much for making time, Patricia.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. It's very odd to read my work, but yes.
It was wonderful to hear.
Thank you.
That was Patricia reading her Haibun. She runs Poetry P, which is more than a podcast. There are regular submissions to the Poetry P Journal and Split P, the zine for split sequences. If you're interested in submitting to any of the opportunities Poetry P has for you, please visit her website at poetryp.com. The music for Ripples in the Sand is by Richard Grant, and the podcast is produced by Richard Grant. This is your host, Sangeeta Kalarikkal, signing off.